24/7 preparedness against acute pollution, both at sea and on the shoreline. So Rune will speak about plastic pellets as acute pollution and speak about experiences in Norway from the trans-carrier incident. Rune, you have 15 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I will start to tell you a little bit about the Norwegian Coastal Administration, a bit about the background and the Norwegian Pollution Act and how this has been figured out to handle cases like this in Norway. And of course, our experience from the real accident here. But the Norwegian Coastal Administration, we actually have the responsibility for all navigation. It means lighthouses, all navigational aids, a lot of electronics. We even have our own satellite program to monitor ships' movements in the sea. And we are now actually just transferred to a new ministry. And so we are under the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Fisheries in Norway. And it doesn't make, we used to be under the Ministry of Transportation, but it doesn't change the tasks that we have to deal with anyway. So, but we both are working to have efficient transport at sea, because in general, transport at sea is better for the environment than other forms of transport. And we also try to do everything to make the sea transport greener, with both helping budgets, harbors, do everything to actually have as green as possible transportation. And as you may know, Norway is the nation that actually is quite far ahead when it comes to new ways of propulsion systems based on electricity, hydrogen, ammonia, things like that. And we work closely with all the developers who work with that. And our vision is to have the safest and the cleanest seas in the world. So that is the goal that everybody is aiming for in Norwegian Coastal Administration. So that I work within the protection of the environment and environmental response, which is one of three main tasks that the Norwegian Coastal Administration deals with. So we have to prevent and limit environmental damage caused by acute pollution. So we have a 24-hour service. There's always somebody on guard who can start any sort of action if something happens. We also have a national emergency towing preparedness, especially in the north, because there are pretty large transportations of oil, gas, etc. that comes from Russia and goes very close to the Norwegian coast in Finnmark and Troms, the northern parts of Norway. We also handle shipwreck that can cause damage or to the environment. That's mainly concerned with oil in them, but we also have some other shipwrecks that we are working with. And because of World War II, we have more than 2,000 shipwrecks in Norwegian waters. And we also follow up all cases when there is a polluter. So we also are the one who uses the law that assure that people are doing what they have to do according to the law. And we work a lot internationally on cooperation with all, because if there's a big oil spill or a big accident at sea, there's no nation in the world that can handle that alone. So we need actually help from other nations, resources, ships, equipment, people. And we have a couple of times we have gotten a lot of help from especially something called the Copenhagen Agreement. That is Norway and Sweden that works together. And when there is accident, we have gotten help, and we have also provided help to these nations. So when it comes to acute pollution, we are responsible for the government's preparedness. So this is sort of the top layer of preparedness when it comes to acute pollution. Of course, the polluter himself has to take action, the municipalities has to do things, etc. So we also have all the contingencies plans, because when there is an accident, the Navy, the Coast Guard, private resources, everybody plays together in Norway, and we have very strong laws, so we can pull on all these resources, both governmental and private resources, if we need them. So I said there are 3 levels. So the private preparedness is quite a lot of resources when it comes to the oil industry in the North Sea. They actually have a lot of oil recovery ships, and they have trained people on shoreline cleanups, things like that. But that is in the part of Norway that would be influenced by an accident. So they don't cover the whole Norway, but these resources are resources we can use. And of course, all private industry has their own preparedness. So there is quite a lot of private. And the municipalities, as we see in this case, they are also very important. They have to dimension themselves for typical local incidents they may have within their own borders. And they have to give assistance to us if there's a large emergency. And they also work in 32 regions where the municipalities has an agreement with their neighbors. So they have these inter-municipality preparedness regions called the EUA in Norwegian, which means Interkommunale utvalg mot akut forurensning. So it's acute pollution that they work with. So then I'm coming to the trans-carrier incident. We already seen the movie, it happened far down there, and this is, we have a system where you can see where things probably would show up, and we did that to get help from Norwegian Meteorological Institute to run different scenarios, different wind currents, and where they would hit. And this map is pretty accurate where it actually happened. The only thing is we haven't gotten any report from Denmark that they saw anything from this accident, but the Danish coast has a lot of sand, and we see that these pellets, if they're small amounts, they disappear very fast down in the sand. So the main thing for us, what we didn't know if this was within the law, what we define as an acute pollution there, or if it's more littering, then it's actually only the municipality that would be responsible for cleaning up in Norway. So that went to the highest level, and also to, there's a body in Norway where the government, when they don't agree about the laws, that they had to bring up these cases to, and they are deciding if this was acute pollution or not. And the decision ended up that this is an acute pollution situation because it happened acute and it could hurt the environment. And that was mainly concern, was that plastic pellets could be eaten by seabirds, fish, and that could affect the populations. So that's why it was defined as acute pollution. But as you know, the bureaucracy doesn't work very fast, so that took quite a long time before that was decided. But when that was decided, then we said that this is a national emergency, and then the Norwegian Coastal Administration can actually take share. And then we took contact with both the insurance company and the ship owner, and they both were Norwegian, and they both were very concerned about the influence that the accident could have to the environment. So they have been following up very closely, and we had a lot of meetings with these bodies to see what we're doing, how we're doing, how much resources, how much input we should have to clean up. And in addition, the ship owner has actually used more money than actually just for pellets. They also cleaned up all the marine litter. So this was not a really big accident. It's just half a container we're talking about. But when you see the numbers, it's 620 million pellets. And that's why they showed up everywhere. So there's a lot when you actually see that, but the amount, and if you have heard about the accident in Sri Lanka, it's about 100 times more. So, so the stakeholders then, when we say that this is a national emergency situation, then it's Norwegian Coastal Administration who makes the decisions. We make the priorities. Where should we clean up? How much should we clean up? And we also, all the costs goes through Norwegian administration, and they are sent to the polluter, and that they are represented by the insurance company, which is Gard, who's also situated as Grid in Arendal. So we have a very close cooperation with that insurance company and had many cases during the years with them. So we know them pretty well and they know us. So. And the ship owner, they had people who followed the whole operation, and they also made contracts with Oslofjorden Friluftsråd, which has been playing a much more important part in this accident than if it had been an oil spill, both because they started cleaning up before we said that this was a national accident that we had to be in charge of, and also because they have contact with all the local communities who's doing cleaning up from marine litter. So both we and the ship owner use that way of contacting all the people who's doing a lot of the work out in the field. So we used the EUA, the response units along the coast, the local communities. They have been very important. They did all the surveys, and they surveyed more than 1,000 locations. Tells them they walked a lot of seashore. And so the Oslofjord Recreation Society, they actually had, they got the working plan for us, but they followed up all the organization that did the private cleanup companies, which there are a lot of, because there are money from different sources that you can apply from. So there are quite a few companies who sort of has that as a part of their income. They could have other incomes too. So they normally do a lot of different, they could have people that are unemployed to get starting a job. They have all different types of people connected to them, but they have a core of people who's very trained, very used to working on the shoreline, how to operate boats, which is very important because this is dangerous work. It's easy to happen accidents. So that has, they have actually done the beach cleaning. So we also were very concerned about how would this affect the environment. So we used to had to do what we call fingerprint analysis. That is very important because we had to know if these pellets that we found along the coast actually came from that container, from that production of pellets. And as you know, this is a global problem. There are pellets all over, and we also have pollution sources from factories both on the Swedish west coast and on in the Porsgrunn, Bamble area in Norway. There are a lot of old pollutions of pellets in those areas, and they have cleaned up quite a bit, but when you go in and you search the beaches close to these factories, you find also other sorts of pellets. We were concerned about additives because the plastic I had here was very clean, was made of polystyrene, and it didn't have all the additives that comes later in the process. If you want to produce it as a hard plastic, one that can resist sun for a long time, different you put additives, or if it should be a softener. As you know, many of these additives are really bad for the environment. So we had to see if there was any additives. Luckily, there wasn't any there that we had to be especially concerned about. And we also looked at seabirds and fish, and we had a lot of eider ducks that died in the Oslofjord that spring at the same time. and they were collected to see why they died. And we also had an addition on to actually see if they had been eating and if there was a lot of pellets in their digestive tract, but we couldn't find any. So that was not, they actually didn't get enough food. It didn't have anything to do with the extent of pellets. And we also collected a lot of fish, small size fish, because on those they could actually block up the digestive system. So Norway has a very long program of monitoring the fish population in Skagerrak. And because we had that program, we sort of used the fish that they collect, and they would see if there was any effects, and they couldn't find anything. And as you see, there's a link at the bottom of this slide where you can go in and actually find the reports. They are not in English, all of them, but they have English summary, so you can figure out the main findings of those reports. So, see all the places we took field samples. We had to go broadly out to see if we got some from Sweden too, just to be sure that it was from the same accidents. So, and you see those two red ones, they were not from this source, it was not the same ones. So we found other pellets, but you do that all over the world. This is a global problem, but not in the amounts in Norway, and we have never seen this in Norway before in these amounts. You see there from the fish and what they did. I don't want to go into it, but it's a lot of fish, 623 fish, 9 different species were tested. So there were no traces of plastic were found in any of the samples. The seabirds, you see the eider ducks that, and as was mentioned, there are environmental quite a lot problems connected to the Oslo fjord, and there's been a lot of focus on that in the last years. And with these dying eider ducks, we also took 50 of those and went truly through the digestive to see if there are any pellets. But there was only 2, one had one in the bill and one had swallowed one, but there was no, you couldn't explain the increased mortality that we saw. Back to the operation, we had more than 1,000 locations reported, and they all have been surveyed, as I said. And of those, there was 434 that had so much that we defined them as a working position that had to be cleaned. And if it was smaller amounts, when they were surveying, they would collect it. They would bring some light tools with them so they could pick up small amounts. That very often happened. So as we also saw that it was very important to have a fast response, which is a bit bad if that's, as now we know that this is defined as acute pollution. If we had started as soon as they showed up, I'm sure we would have cleaned up even more, because then we would put more resources into the effort in the first weeks when they were more collected, they were easier to pick up because they weren't down in ground and down in the vegetation. So we saw that the tide, heavy rain, storms remobilized the pellets. These were places that we had found a lot of pellets, and we came back after a storm or very heavy rain. A lot of pellets had disappeared. So this is, we also knew that we could never collect all of it. So we tried to set the limit for how much we should clean. And when we made these decisions, we knew what sort of additives there was in the plastic. And it has been a lesson learned for us, actually, that plastic is very different. Some plastic are much worse for the environment than other types of plastic. And I think that hasn't been addressed very much when it comes to cleaning up litter. There are the additives that are actually worse for the environment. So,
Rune,
yeah.
I'm just keeping an eye on time. Could you maybe begin to wind up maybe in the next minute or so?
Yeah.
That would be great. Thank you.
So we said that the efforts you should limit, if a man works the whole day, 8-hour day, then you should actually say that you should collect more than 0.5 liter per day. If you didn't find enough, then you had to move on to the next site. So, yeah. This is the last one. Fast response, very important. Collect the large amounts first before they remobilize. You have to prioritize those that's most important for the environment, where you know there's a lot of fish feeding or a lot of seabirds. You have to test out different methods the whole time, and even if a method didn't work very well on a sand beach that's dry in summer, it may work very well on a wet, heavy sand in the wintertime. You have to see what sort of plastic you're dealing with. You have to evaluate the effects it might have on the environment. And we need these local teams that we have used, they are very important to use in the future too. So we can also use for oil spill response. So that we would try to get them into a contract with them and train them. And we also see that the normal approach that the Norwegian Coastal Administration do when there's a big oil spill works very well with this sort of litter. And now it is a part of thing we would handle in the future. We know that this is a part of the Pollution Act. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rune. If you could please stop sharing your screen, then we can invite the next speaker. At the top of your screen, there will be a button that appears.
Yeah, I just need to get out of the presentation mode.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much, Rune. We are going